Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're just waiting for all of the participants to enter the webinar. So I'll just wait for a few minutes and then we'll officially start our spotlight on research. I'm just going to give it just about another minute before I start. All right, it's a little after 7, so hopefully everyone who wanted to sign in has signed in on the webinar. I'm going to get things started this evening. Good evening and welcome to Spotlight on Research. My name is Joanne Bracken and I'm the CEO for the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening. Before the program gets underway, there's a few things that I would like to bring to your attention. For tonight's presentation, all participants on the webinar are automatically muted. Your video and names are not shown to presenters or to other participants in our webinar format. There will be a question and answer period following the presentations. You may enter your questions at any time using the Q&A panel, which is available on your screen. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the time allotted, and only questions relevant to the presentations tonight will be addressed. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dan Cole, President of the Board, to bring greetings on behalf of the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Joanne. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight on Research. I'm Dan Cole, Board President for the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening. On behalf of the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, thanks for joining us tonight. We have nearly 200 people signed up for this presentation, so clearly it's a topic of interest across Saskatchewan. Research is also a priority for the board of the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. We know that funding for research into dementia is lagging far behind that for other fatal diseases. Dementia is now the third leading cause of death in Canada and is rising while death rates for cancer, heart disease, stroke, and HIV/AIDS have been declining. These diseases have benefited from greater investments in research. Every year, the Alzheimer Society Research Program has a $10 million gap in dementia research funding. This results in the majority of high-quality fundable research projects not being funded. As a result of this shortfall, the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan is committed to raising more funds for research. Research is essential to provide hope to families living with dementia, and investments in research are key to changing the future for people living with dementia. Tonight, we'll be sharing information with you about the Alzheimer Society's role in funding and supporting research, information on funded research projects, and highlighting the impact that research has on people living with dementia. The Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan Board believes that a breakthrough in research will be a catalyst for transformative change for people living with dementia. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. We're committed to this vision by funding research, and we're committed to you. Funding research provides hope for a different future for people living with dementia. Thanks for joining us this evening, and I do hope you enjoy the presentations. It's now my pleasure to introduce Graham Hunter. Graham's a volunteer with the Alzheimer Society Major Gift Campaign Cabinet. He's passionate about research and is joining us this evening to talk about why research is important to him and his hopes about what research will accomplish in the future. Graham?
Good evening. Thank you very much, Dan, for that introduction, and thank you to the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan for inviting me here tonight to share my thoughts on dementia research. For tonight, I was asked two specific questions, which Dan just mentioned, so I'll address them in order. The first, why is research important to me, and what is my connection to dementia? I have connections to dementia through my family. My parents both suffered from dementia during their later years, with it affecting my mom sooner and harder than it did my dad. Looking into my crystal ball, it's not difficult to believe that I may follow that path. More recently, at age 61, my younger brother was diagnosed with a particularly nasty form called Lewy body dementia. Fortunately for me, at age 68, I am not yet showing any signs of cognitive impairment. I'm able to say that because several months ago, I joined a dementia research study. Participants must be aged 60 to 85 years old, not yet showing signs of dementia, and are tested for that before being accepted into the study. If I had not been tested for cognitive impairment for the study, everything in my experience suggests my first indication of cognitive impairment will occur only after I exhibit sufficient signs for those around me to become concerned and get involved. My current interest in learning more about dementia was initially piqued from assisting my parents. It started when they sold their condo to move into an assisted living situation. They lived in BC, I lived in Saskatchewan, and I was trying over the phone to help my dad deal with closing paperwork for their condo sale. It wasn't going well when I remembered that I had power of attorney, signed by both my parents years earlier. I said, "Hey Dad, if you'd like, I can handle this for you and I'm using the power of attorney." There was a sigh of relief over the phone as he said, "Would you?" Neither one of them touched their finances again for the remaining 10 to 12 years of their lives. I was happy to manage those finances for them and don't regret a moment of the time spent on it. As I approach the age my parents were when this happened, my big question is, when should someone step in for me? A difference between my parents' circumstances and mine is that my dad had a defined benefit pension plan. I've been self-employed all my life and do not have a formal pension. Knowing this, I started saving and investing for retirement in my early 20s. Where the difference really shows between someone in a pension plan and someone who self-manages their investments is that if someone in a pension plan suffers cognitive decline, their payments will continue. If or when I suffer from cognitive decline, I can unknowingly vaporize some or all of the value my wife and I spent 50 years accumulating. This really gets my attention. Accordingly, I have a large interest in research that may lead to earlier and better detection of cognitive decline, which in turn will allow people to better plan for their future. Second question was, what are the impacts, outcomes, and hopes for the future that I hope will be achieved through research that will make a difference for myself and others? I volunteered to help the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan raise funds for research. I am just a worker bee. I don't get to direct where any of the funds go, and I'm good with that. But since I was asked, I do have some hopes for outcomes that will provide impact now. I subscribe to the concept that if something can't be measured, it can't be managed. At present, I am not aware of any objective measurements to test for cognitive decline. Prior to joining the study I'm in, with my family history, I tried to get tested for cognitive decline with very limited results. My observation is that almost all dementia resources are focused on helping people who already suffer from it. What I think would really make a difference for myself and for others is if some of the research funds were invested in a diagnostic tool that could be used by the general population. To provide maximum results, such a tool should be easily accessible, it must be easy to use, it must provide results that are easy to interpret by the user. The results should not require interpretation from a healthcare professional, and it must be scalable to accept large numbers of users. My experience is current testing is all done by medical professionals. The wait to see one can be long, and to my thinking, the results are more subjective than objective. A self-administered test with immediate objective results would be a quantum leap forward. We already have such tools in other areas of healthcare. Two examples are stopwatches and bathroom scales. With a stopwatch, you can measure your pulse. To learn more about your cardiovascular health, you can monitor your heart rate during different activities. If you're really interested, you can use heart rate measurements to extract maximum cardiovascular benefit from your physical activities. With a bathroom scale, you can measure your weight. There are several guidelines available for weight range or body mass index. Anyone who is interested in their overall health can benchmark their weight against those guidelines. Having those tools available does not mean people will actually use them. For those that do, they can be an invaluable part of monitoring and maintaining your health. Not only would I love to see a similar type of tool for measuring cognitive capacity, I believe this tool already exists. It is not currently available to the general public. The study I'm in has an online test that takes approximately 5 minutes to complete on a smartphone. The test is administered once every 3 months when participants are asked to complete the test each morning and evening for 7 days. The tests are identical each time in terms of cognitive tasks to be performed, but the components of each task are random and impossible to guess or study for in advance. I believe the tests are graded on a combination of accuracy and time required to complete. This test checks all my boxes. It's online, so it's easily accessible to anyone with a smartphone. The descriptions and explanations are easy to understand, making the tests easy to use. It currently only provides results to the people running the study, but it should be easy to make them available to participants immediately on completion of the test, and participants can then interpret their own results. Ideally, those results could be viewed compared to a peer group. And finally, it's scalable. I expect it can have a massive number of users online at any given time, as it is not graphics or data intensive. I see huge potential for such a tool to be used by ordinary people. Like a scale or a stopwatch, not everyone would use the tool, but for those who do, it would be invaluable. I don't see it replacing any current practices. I see it supplementing them. To conclude, research is important to me because I believe dementia concerns will grow as human lifespans lengthen. Current research is focused on finding a cure, providing better support and care for people living with dementia, and for earlier scientific detection. To those initiatives, I would really like to see some resources applied to providing ordinary people with a simple tool that can be used to monitor cognitive status. Being able to monitor your own status should lead to being able to make better decisions about managing your future. Thank you very much for listening tonight.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for sharing your connections to dementia. I'm sure, like many other people here tonight, many of us do have connections to people with dementia. And it's great for us to hear from you about what your hopes are for the future, where people can manage their own healthcare and perhaps find better ways that we can adapt healthy brain lifestyles and perhaps prevent dementia on our own. This evening, we have 3 presenters to speak with you about research. Laila Ali from the Alzheimer Society Research Program, Dr. Allison from the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan, and Dr. Elaine Stasiulis from Baycrest. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this evening. Laila Ali joined the Alzheimer Society of Canada in July of 2022 as the Research Grants and Award Coordinator. Within a short time, she was promoted to the research lead and then to the manager of research, where she is managing all aspects of the Alzheimer Society Research Program. Laila previously served as the National Manager of Research for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada. In her 18-year tenure with the charitable health sector, she has worn many hats: donor stewardship, event planning and management, and payroll deduction for program management. She has consistently been recognized for outstanding performance. Laila has a deep desire and passion to improve human welfare, and as such, she lends her efforts to many charitable activities. Laila joins us this evening to share information about the Alzheimer Society Research Program. Welcome, Laila.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and good evening, everyone. Greetings from the Alzheimer Society of Canada. I'm just so very happy to be here. And Graham, thank you so much for sharing your story. I too stand before you as a person with lived experience. My beautiful mom, at the age of 70, was diagnosed with a type of frontotemporal dementia called supranuclear palsy. At that time, we had no idea that it was a type of dementia, and it was actually serendipitous that I ended up with the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and it was a bit of a surreal moment when I realized that, you know, it falls within the umbrella of dementias. And so I'm committed and passionate about research, and I really hope that cures are around the corner. So thank you for that, for sharing your story. Today, I'll be taking the opportunity to provide an overview of the Alzheimer Society Research Program. Next slide, please. And so for those of you who are not very familiar with the Alzheimer Society of Canada, as Dan alluded to earlier, what our vision is, it is a world without Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. But how are we going to get there? By realizing our mission, of course. In summary, our mission is we do want to cure Alzheimer's disease and other dementias and create a better life for people that are affected. And how are we doing that? And so in many ways, we provide help and support. So no matter where you are, where you live in Canada, you'll be able to access education, resources, and support that can address your needs. Providing the right information at the right time to the right people is paramount. And I wish we knew about the Alzheimer Society of Canada when my mom was going through her disease. We would have been able to handle it a lot better. We also provide awareness and education, advocacy. We try to influence policy and decision-making to address the needs of people with dementia and their caregivers. And what else do we do? My favorite part of what we do, we fund research. We fund the best and brightest minds in dementia research with the hope that one day realizing our vision, a world without dementias. And I don't know why that always makes me very emotional. I think it's the connection to my mom. So next slide, please. The Alzheimer Society Research Program, or as the ASRP that we call it for short, is a national annual research competition, and it funds researchers from all across Canada in all areas of dementia research. The ASRP has been funding research for over 30 years with over 67 million invested. And that number will change as this year we're right now looking at funding scenarios, hoping to add about $5 million to that number for the 2023 competition. Our aim is to provide support to researchers from the very early stages in their careers to later as established investigators to attract and retain them in the field of dementia research. We want to be able to blaze the trail in treatment, care, and cure for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Because of this, we fund all streams of dementia research that look at the biological mechanisms of the disease to projects that aim to improve the quality of life for those living with and impacted by dementia. Next slide, please. And so this slide provides an overview of the general themes of research that we support within our program. As you can see, therapy, care, risk, diagnosis, treatment, translational, epidemiology, and cause. And a point to note here that we're very proud of, while several funding agencies have paused their research support during COVID-19, the Alzheimer Society remains steadfast in their commitment to people living with dementia and to our research community, because like they say, dementia doesn't stop, and neither do we. And so as a result of this, we're very pleased to be able to continue to provide support to the research community during these unprecedented times. And again, thank you to all of our donors and our supporters, because without you, none of this would be possible. Next slide, please. So our research program falls into two main streams: biomedical and discovery and quality of life. With the biomedical and discovery research, it focuses on the science of the brain and changes that are associated with dementia, which help to identify therapeutic targets to reverse, stop, or cure the disease. Often described as discovery research and research that is interested in the future of dementia. So we all know that from bench to bedside, therapies can take 5 years or 10 years, 15 years and upwards. So with that stream, we're looking to the future for cures. Then we have the quality of life and care research. And this stream explores issues related to care that impact the lives of people with dementia and their caregivers, which includes, but not limited to, risk factors, lifestyle factors, behavioral and cognitive changes, physical support, caregiving, and health service delivery. So with this stream, we're looking to what is it that we can do now to make a difference in the lives of people affected with dementia. And next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of the impact that our research program has, where through our investment, and again with your support, we're supporting projects that can lead to the development of new drugs. Different forms of dementia can be identified through new imaging techniques. Technology is being used in new and innovative ways to help improve the quality of life of people with lived experience, and care delivery is improved within community and long-term care settings. And next slide, please. In terms of a little more recent progress, and I can't share a whole lot here, but I wanted to point out that there is progress and information is forthcoming. So we looked at Dr. Sean Whitehead from Western University in London, Ontario. He reached out, he was actually a successful candidate in the 2022 competition with his proof of concept grant. And he reached out recently to let us know that they're making some good progress testing their biomarkers in human population cohorts. They're looking at focusing on patients with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, with the idea of looking at biomarkers that predict the conversion from MCI to Alzheimer's disease. And so they're making some great progress. He's going to be presenting soon at one of our staff meetings. And so in the future, you will hear more about his progress. And again, with Dr. Wajid Al-Kabani, I can't share a whole lot, but we know he reached out about his product. He was successful in the 2021 competition with his doctoral award. And he has made great progress, him and his team. They're going to be featured in a very prominent journal coming up very soon. And again, information will be forthcoming. But I wanted to plug that in there to let you know that as we move on, we are experiencing success, and we hope to see a lot more of this as we move forward. As an FYI, this year competition, there are many of the grant applications that scored well above the cutoff for funding. So yeah, we're looking forward to see where we land. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea what we offer in terms of funding, the different types of grants and award, we have 4. We have the doctoral award, which provides an opportunity for trainees pursuing their PhDs to begin the process of becoming future independent investigators in the field of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Trainees receive up to $129,000 for 3 years. With the postdoctoral fellowships, this provides an opportunity to graduates with a PhD or MD who wish to gain additional research experience within an established research environment. And this amount that we funded is $150,000 for over 2 years. And the new investigator grant recipients receive up to $200,000, which can be used over a period of up to 4 years. These grants are offered to help launch the careers of outstanding researchers who are within the first 6 years of their initial academic appointment. And with the proof of concept grants, they receive up to $100,000, which can be used over a period of up to 3 years. So you can see that these grants are designed to fund established researchers in conducting innovative, high-end, high-risk, high-reward approach to dementia research. And as you can see, we are funding researchers from early to the later stage in their career in every capacity. So that's something that we're very proud of. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share with you some key dates. So as if I know there are people that help us with our funding, and as you go about talking about the program, the competition is usually launched in September. with a deadline date of November. Peer review meetings are held in February. We just had our peer review February 6th, 7th, and 8th, and a lot of work went into that. We are so grateful to all of the reviewers, both the citizen reviewers and the academic reviewers who helped us in this process. We know that it involves a lot of time and effort, and we truly appreciate that. Results are announced in the spring, and then funding commences in July. That's just to give you a rough idea of how that works. And next slide, please. So I wanted to give you an idea of how many applications and the breakdown that we received this year. So we received 105 applications, and as you can see, 69 awards and 36 grants, and you can see the breakdown. But more importantly, what I wanted to share with you was the provincial breakdown, and you'll understand why. So we received 30 applications from Ontario, 34 from Quebec, 17 from BC, 8 from Manitoba, 11 from Alberta, 2 from Nova Scotia, 2 from Newfoundland, and 1 from Saskatchewan. Now, it is not uncommon to see the lion's share of applications from Ontario, Quebec, and BC. We'll be working very closely with our colleagues in Saskatchewan to promote our next competition. This year, I did reach out actually to the Office of the Vice President for Research at both the University of Saskatchewan and the University of Regina, but sadly, we did not see an uptick on applications. There were a couple people that started applications from Saskatchewan, and I did reach out, and overwhelmingly, what I heard was that COVID had impacted a lot, and they were not able to move forward with the application process at this time. So hopefully, moving forward, we'll see those numbers shift somewhat. It'll be great to see. And next slide, please. And so the Alzheimer Society of Canada, we host the research program for the peer review process each year. This is the process of rating applications by reviewers who bring a specific dementia research expertise to the table. The ratings are used to create rank-ordered lists of applications, and funding decisions are based on these lists and available funds. Now, to stay in integrity with our peer review process, we do not skip, we stay within the rank order of application. We do not skip rank. Applications evaluated based on scientific merit, novelty, and their relevance to Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. However, also considered will be the quality of the lay summary and description of how the anticipated findings could influence other research in the field and the lives of those impacted by dementia. Reviewer assignments are based on ability to participate. We take conflicts into account. We take, as like I said earlier, the expertise of the reviewer. Primary and secondary reviewers are asked to review the full application assigned to them and submit a written report, which is shared with the applicants. They use a rating scale like this that you see on the slide here. And I'm happy to say there are so many of the applications that are 4 and above this year. So we're going to have a really hard time, with allocating funds. It'll be great to get some more coming in. And so that's what we hope for. So we'll see where we land. Next slide, please. So what is it that makes the ASRP unique? How are we different from other funding agencies? Number one, we are the only one currently funding quality of life applications. As you can recall, I spoke about that earlier, that stream where we're looking at making a difference right now in the lives of people that are affected. So that's thing number one. Funding early hypotheses with the proof of concept grants, we fund high risk, high yield, and we ask for no preliminary data. It is a catch-22 situation for researchers, and they can identify with this. They have a great hypothesis, but everyone is asking for preliminary data. How would they be able to get this data if no one takes a chance on them? So actually, next competition, it'll be interesting to see, because at that time, the first set of proof of concept, we'll be getting the results. And so it'll be great to see that we can move some of these folks on to the next phase of their research. So stay tuned for that as well. We also fund new investigators. We know that funding usually goes to the more established researchers. And so by funding new investigators, our hope is that we not only attract them, but we retain them in the field of dementia research. And also citizen reviewers, using them in our review process. And the next slide, please, talk a bit more about that. So people with lived experience is used to describe people living with dementia and or their caregivers, not unlike myself and like Graham. They include people from diverse communities, include 2SL, LGBTQIA+, Indigenous people, people of color, and other racialized communities. Collectively, they strive for autonomy and for their voices to be heard. Knowledge gained from lived experience is invaluable to research and is critical to the work of the Alzheimer Society of Canada. Engaging people with lived experience in research gives researchers a truly authentic perspective on priorities that are important to patients, insight into unmet needs, and an awareness of problems and issues that they encounter. The aim of this collaboration is to identify research priorities that are more focused and more responsive to the needs of people with lived experience. We want to ensure that the research we fund is meaningful and relevant to the people that it will ultimately impact. And that is why we involve citizen reviewers. I was at a WHO meeting recently, and they talked about the first world countries that are funding research, and there's only 13% that involve people with lived experience in their research. So we're hoping to create a model system that can inspire other people to do the same. Next slide, please. One of the other things that we do is that in June of last year, we created a research portal. So it's an avenue where we can help researchers and students find participants for their observational studies or clinical trials. This portal is open to both to Alzheimer Society Research Program recipients, as well as to researchers who meet our eligibility criteria, which is it must be relevant to people with lived experience. The application review process occurs via our online grants and awards platform, which is currently SurveyMonkey Apply. We review the applications that are submitted. If approved, we do have it translated and to have bilingual information available, and then it's posted on our Participate in Research page on our website. We currently have 52 studies posted. And again, like I said, the portal was launched in June, and we've had close to 400 requests from people to either participate or requesting more information. So if you do have some time, please sign in and check that out. Next slide, please. We are not alone in our endeavors. I'd be remiss if I did not mention our partners with our ASRP. By working with those who share similar values and goals, together we can make more of a positive impact on the lives of people who are facing Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. I'd like to acknowledge Brain Canada, Canadian Institute of Health Research, Institute of Aging, Fonds de Recherche de Québec Santé, Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, and Research Manitoba. We're ever so grateful for this partnership. And that brings me to my final slide. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I really wanted to share this with you. Over the past 3 years, there were 198 fundable applications that were left on the floor, meaning we did not have enough money to go down the list to fund them. This makes me always very sad. We don't know, could any one of these have made a significant impact? We'll never know. As we look to the future, we want to position the Alzheimer Society as a leader in the research sphere. And so we will be constantly strategizing until we get there. I thank you for your kind and patient listening. The last slide. On here is the link to our website should you want to look for additional information. But it was a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Laila. It's wonderful to have you here to share information about the Alzheimer Society Research Program. I look forward to working with you to increase the number of applications and to continue to share research success stories and the impact of research with people across Saskatchewan. So thank you so much. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Allison Kammer. Dr. Kammer is an assistant professor and registered dietitian in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan. Allison has undergraduate degrees in nutrition and women's and gender studies, a Master of Science in Community and Epidemiology, and a PhD in nutrition. Her research focuses on nutrition, older adults, dementia, long-term care, and end-of-life care. She's a member of several interprofessional research teams, including the Rural Dementia Action Research Team and Team 15 of the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration in Aging. She's a board member of the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan, co-chairs the Professional Conduct Committee of the Saskatchewan Dietitians Association, and chairs the Saskatchewan Long-Term Care Registered Dietitian Network. Welcome, Allison.
Thanks so much, Joanne. You can hear me. I want to begin by thanking you for this opportunity to share some of the research that our team is working on, and also really want to thank Laila for the work from the Alzheimer Society, and say a particular thanks because I was one of those doctoral students who benefited from a scholarship from the Alzheimer Society Research Program. And without that, I wouldn't have the position I have and be able to continue doing great research here in Saskatchewan. So thank you. You can throw my slides up now. Great, so tonight I'm going to talk about mealtime enhancement in long-term care. I'll cover some general principles and then describe a research project that our team is working on. Next slide. So there's a strong body of evidence that shows nutrition plays a role in risk reduction, preventing or delaying cognitive decline. And we know that for those who have dementia, there are both physiological and behavioral changes as a result of their illness that increase the risk of malnutrition and frailty. We also know that nutrition care for persons living with dementia can slow decline and prevent comorbidities, the negative health effects that result from the disease process. And nutrition care is an essential component of quality of life. Next slide. Now, long-term care, this is a figure taken from the National Long-Term Care Standards document that was released just this January. And it's meant to depict long-term care in Canada. You can see the resident in the center with substitute decision makers, essential care partners, including family, and they're supported by a foundation of resident-centered care. It's important to remember that approximately 60 to 75% of residents living in long-term care have cognitive impairment or a diagnosis of dementia. Next slide. And it looks like there are some little animations in there. So first animation. So now looking at nutrition care within long-term care, one way to view this is to consider four main components. The first is the therapeutic component, where the care team considers each resident individually and assesses their specific nutritional requirements and considers how specific diseases or chronic conditions impact those requirements. Next click. And then the second is quality of life, and you can click again, where eating and drinking are considered because people don't typically eat nutrients. We eat food, and eating and drinking are about more than just nutrients. They're about taste, pleasure, and enjoyment. Next click. The third is the menu. In long-term care, and you can just click a few more times. Couple more, one more. There we go. The third is the menu. In long-term care, the menu is how nutrition care is structured. You need quality foods or ingredients, which means contracts or tenders, delivery schedules, inventory, supply, and storage. The menu needs to be carefully planned to meet the nutrient adequacy levels for residents. And along with this, a central part of the menu planning is balance. And that means that a similar quantity of macronutrients like protein, fat, and carbohydrate are served at each meal. One example of why this is helpful for residents You can imagine those residents who have diabetes. That balance of carbohydrates then prevents blood sugars from swinging really high or really low if there's a different amount of carbohydrate at each meal. Then the menu needs to include modifications for specialized therapeutic diets. A good example of that is texture modified options for residents who have dysphagia, which is a compromised ability to swallow. Taste and appearance need to be considered, along with operational planning for the food service staff to be able to prepare it all using safe food handling and preparation techniques. Next slide. The fourth broad component is meal times. Meal times are where the majority of eating and drinking happens. Some happens at recreation events too, as well, and snacks, etc. So staff often track things like how much is eaten at the meal time, and they watch for changes in eating and drinking that might indicate health changes. Meal times sound simple, but they're not. They also require a lot of careful planning, like how to safely get each resident to the dining room, where each resident sits and what type of chair do they sit in, how can they be best positioned for eating. Does the resident have to take medications prior to eating or once they've eaten? Do they need assistive devices like special cutlery and tableware, like a built-up spoon or an anti-slip plate? How to offer the food, how to serve the food, then how to provide eating assistance for residents who need it. And many residents with dementia do need that eating assistance. So this requires that all members of the care team, not just nutrition and food service, all long-term care staff need good training to accomplish mealtime care, and communication is essential. And meal times are often a place where residents get to make choices. Choices are an important way that we all exert our autonomy and personhood. And when someone moves to long-term care, they often lose the ability to make a lot of choices for themselves. Often meal times are where they can make choices like deciding between 2 entrees, or the amount of food to eat, or what type of drink they might like at a meal. Next slide. Mealtimes are about more than just intake. People have personal and cultural meanings that are associated with sharing meals. Mealtimes are an opportunity for socialization and interaction among residents and family and staff. Mealtimes often provide a sense of connection and belonging for residents. And in long-term care, mealtimes are a key activity to foster relationship-centered care. Next slide. When each of these broad interdependent components, the therapeutics, quality of life, menu, and mealtimes all function together, nutrition care is great. Next slide. But we know that there are a lot of challenges. There's some rigidity to mealtimes. Things like food safety production standards mean that the food can only be held for a certain amount of time, which can mean less flexibility. Congregate dining comes with some realities, like compromise about the menu to provide adequacy and enjoyment to a large number of people, and food costs, which can often mean that there's not a wide variety of options offered to reduce waste and not go over budget. And that then creates a contradiction what I just said about mealtimes being a source of choice for residents. Often there are limits put on choice, like the timing of meals, where to eat, and what options are available. And then these challenges can be made worse by a task-focused approach instead of a relationship-focused approach. Staff don't do this intentionally, but it's very easy to slide into what we call systemizing of meals, rushing to complete the tasks of serving and assisting, rather than engaging in the social and enjoyment aspects of the meal and encouraging interaction, decision-making, and independence. For example, if my care plan said that I like tea, a task-focused approach might be that each time I sit down for a meal, a cup of tea is placed in front of me. Quick task accomplished. But just because I like tea doesn't mean that I want it at every single meal. And even if the answer is consistently, yes, I like tea, I would probably like to be asked first. That simple act acknowledges me as an active participant. It engages me in my care, and it can open up a chat. Next slide. And then the COVID-19 pandemic, which we know has had profound and devastating effects on long-term care in Canada. Mealtime challenges existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic really set us back. Our team completed a research project across Canada, and we found that relationship-centered mealtime practices were very negatively affected by the pandemic. Things like the quality of meals provided, residents being confined to their room for eating, being distanced in communal dining room, having very little assistance. I could go on and on and on. The common thread is that the focus diverted to tasks over relationships. And maybe some of that was necessary at times. That's another discussion. But the issue is that we lost a lot of ground in promoting relationship-centered dining, so much so that the practices could feel very foreign to any staff who began training and working in long-term care during the pandemic. Next slide. So what is relationship-centered care? It's a philosophical approach to care that arises out of or is a natural extension of person-centered or resident-centered care philosophy. It emphasizes that the resident is always more important than the task. The job is caring, not tasking. At its core, the goal of relationship-centered care is building trust and meaningful relationships among residents and between residents, family, and staff. It recognizes that relationships are reciprocal. Residents actively give and receive. Relationship-centered care can help to address feelings of isolation and lack of connection or lack of meaning. Relationship-centered care at mealtimes is very important. And mealtimes might be an easier starting place to develop trusting relationships than maybe during sensitive personal care like baths or medical treatments. So relationship-centered mealtimes may not be the total solution, but they're an important part of the solution. Next slide. That brings me to the research project I'm going to give you a snapshot of. It's led by myself and Dr. Heather Keller from the University of Waterloo, and our team includes researchers from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. It's interdisciplinary with nutrition, dietetics, nursing, gerontology, and others, along with long-term care providers, family members, and students. It's an evaluation of a virtual program to enhance relationship-centered mealtimes for residents with dementia and long-term care, and it was funded by a partnership innovation grant between the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation and the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. Next slide. So originally, Dr. Heather Keller, who's a dietitian, and Dr. Sarah Wu, who's a gerontologist, created an evidence-based program to develop and enhance relationship-centered mealtimes in long-term care. It was called CHOICE, which is an acronym for the 6 key principles of relationship-centered mealtimes that Heather developed over years of research. The CHOICE program included an in-person facilitator to implement and facilitate the program. They tested this program in long-term care homes in Ontario, found significant enhancements across a number of different contexts, like different staff mixes, different types of meal service or dining room sizes and designs. It was really great. But the facilitator model wasn't realistic to scale the program across long-term care homes widely. It required highly trained specialists to support, which is just too costly. And also specialists are in short supply. So they worked on adapting the 6 key principles into a virtual training program where long-term care homes could have staff members serve as champions to train virtually and then implement the program locally. Next slide. So the adapted program is called CHOICE Plus. It consists of champions from the long-term care home who do virtual training in the CHOICE Plus principles. They roll out the CHOICE Plus program in the home. They form a dining team for the neighborhood at their long-term care home. They engage in participatory decision-making within that neighborhood to set context-specific goals to enhance relationship-centered mealtime practices. The process is supported by behavior change theories that are process-oriented with plan, do, study, act cycles, CHOICE Plus resources for team self-reflection, audit and feedback, and there's a virtual community of practice, which includes virtual coaching meetings for the champions with Dr. Keller, Dr. Wu, myself, and other team members as needed. Next slide. So the research arm of this is a pilot study to evaluate the new virtual CHOICE Plus program in 2 long-term care homes in Saskatchewan. We're implementing in dedicated dementia neighborhoods because the original CHOICE program wasn't tested in these specific settings. The actual CHOICE Plus program will be supported by the research team for 6 months. We think that should be enough for focused support, but we also want to examine it thoroughly to be sure. Next slide. In terms of what we'll be measuring, there are dining room observation measures using validated scales at baseline and at the 6-month mark to see if change is detected. We're capturing resident demographic factors like sex, average age, cognitive performance scale score to get a sense of the neighborhoods themselves. And we'll be measuring resident quality of life at baseline and post-program using a validated scale. There's a pre and post staff survey to capture change in knowledge and attitude about relationship-centered practices at mealtimes. The champions will complete a brief semi-structured journal about Choice Plus implementation activities each week. We'll capture field notes from the virtual coaching sessions, and we'll conduct interviews with the champions and dining team members, both pre and post program. Next slide. So what do we hope to learn with this project? Well, overall, we want to know what's the feasibility of the virtual program. Does it work? What challenges are experienced? And how does it function in focused dementia care context? We hope that what we learn can be used to then adapt and make further improvements, refine that Choice Plus program so that we can then roll it out across Canada and do a large-scale national research project to examine specific outcomes and see how much of a difference can be made with this kind of program. Next slide. So what are my key takeaways tonight from this quick presentation and the time we've shared? Well, I want you to know that nutrition is essential. There's a different emphasis and application depending on the stage and trajectory of dementia. There's many ways to address and improve nutrition care for residents with dementia in long-term care. One of those is mealtimes, which are a key opportunity for enhancing relationship-centered care in long-term care. By doing that, it will have many positive impacts on the health and quality of life for residents who live with dementia. And applied research is really important for supporting evidence-based practice and implementing it into care. Next slide. So I want to thank SSHRF and the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan for creating the funding opportunity to complete this important research in Saskatchewan. Thank you to the research team and the 2 long-term care homes for supporting this work. And thank you all for listening to me. I hope I've given you some food for thought tonight.
Thank you, Allison. I just want to remind people, if you do have questions at any time, you can continue to enter them in the Q&A section of the website. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for this evening. Dr. Elaine Stasiulis is a research associate for Team 16 Driving and Dementia of the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration in Aging. As a qualitative social science health researcher, she explores the subjective experiences of people's everyday lives, including more recently, people with dementia and family friend carers in the context of driving cessation. In her role as research associate, Elaine manages a multi-project program of research that involves developing, implementing, evaluating, and disseminating interventions to address the safety risks and psychosocial impact of driving cessation for people living with dementia and their family friend carers. Elaine recently completed her PhD in the Sociology of Health and Illness at the University of Toronto. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and thank you also for this opportunity to present our research on the Driving and Dementia Roadmap. And I also just want to thank the previous presenters for their really informative messages that were moving and hopeful of the work to come, and really grateful for that. Okay, I'm going to share my slides. Okay. So I'd like to first acknowledge our research team, led by principal investigators Gary Nagley and Mark Rappaport. We also have co-investigators across Canada, as well as research associates, assistants, and research trainees. I also would like to acknowledge our funders, the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging, which is supported by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and other partners, including the Alzheimer Society of Canada. We've also been funded for this work by the Centre for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, as well as the Ontario Ministry of Health Innovation Fund. And I also want to give a special thanks to the Alzheimer Society organizations across Canada for their support and participation in this research. And in particular, I want to say a special thank you to the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. They have played a pivotal role in this work, and we have continued to do some collaboration with them on other projects related to driving cessation and dementia. So thank you. So for the next 20 minutes, I will first of all give you a brief background about driving and dementia. I will talk about how we developed the Driving and Dementia Roadmap, which I will also refer to as the DDR. I will then give you a brief tour and talk about some of the strategies we have used in disseminating it, as well as our next steps. So driving cessation is a complex, challenging, and emotion-laden process for people living with dementia, their family friend carers, and their healthcare providers. There are two aspects to this process. First, making the decision to stop driving, and second, the transitioning to non-driving. First, I'll start with some statistics about dementia and driving. According to the Canadian Outcome Study in Dementia, out of 719 people with mild and moderate dementia, 203 or 28% were driving at the start of the study. In 2 years, 50% were still driving, and in 3 years, a quarter of people were still driving. So people with dementia do continue to drive for some time. Now, of course, with the prevalence of dementia increasing, there are estimates that in 2028, for instance, that there will be 100,000 drivers with dementia on the roads in Ontario. And I apologize, I don't have statistics for the province of Saskatchewan. So why is this important? Well, it's important because there's a large body of research that has looked at comparing people with dementia's driving performance to those with people who do not have cognitive impairments. And what these studies show is that people with dementia have more problems with road rules, staying in their lanes, changing lanes, making turns, especially left-hand turns, maintaining road speed, going too fast or too slow, stopping appropriately, and avoiding collisions. They also demonstrate less attention and slower decision-making. Driving performance is decreased with increasing dementia severity. And 6 out of 10 studies found that drivers with dementia crashed more often than controls, up to 10-fold. 15 to 16.5% of people with dementia failed on-road driving assessments. There's also a large body of research that has looked at the health and psychosocial outcomes of stopping to drive. What these studies show is that when a person stops driving, a person with dementia stops driving, they have less social engagement and out-of-home activity, they're more depressive symptoms, their general health is poor, their functional status is poor, and their cognitive decline is greater. And there's also greater long-term care placement and a greater risk of death. Another key finding from these studies is the intense emotional impact that driving cessation has on people with dementia. Driving is often connected to people's sense of identity and self-worth. Driving is more than just going from point A to point B. It also gives people a sense of independence, freedom, and control. It's often linked to their identity. Perhaps in the family, they are the ones driving their family members to their functions and activities. And driving is also a source of pleasure for a lot of people. So it's not surprising that when they stop driving, they experience feelings, sometimes very strong feelings of denial, of grief and sadness, of depression, and of anger that is often directed at family members and healthcare providers. Family and friend carers also experience an emotional impact as a result of the person with dementia stopping to drive. They can experience loss, sadness, and grief, the loss of future dreams, fear and anxiety that the person with dementia will be in a vehicle collision. There's often feelings of frustration, anger, and guilt at the reaction of the person with dementia, what they're going through, and their inability to feel that they can help them. And there's also a lot of feeling of overwhelm, in addition to other care carrying tasks. Often family members feel overwhelmed that they have to take care of the responsibility of driving the person and themselves, as well as making alternative transportation arrangements. And healthcare providers, they also experience experience emotions as a result of driving cessation. For them, it's about stress and the emotional strain of talking to their patients and clients about this very difficult subject, and fears that this will harm their therapeutic relationship. So given all these issues, it's not surprising that making the decision to stop driving can be very challenging. A diagnosis of dementia does not necessarily mean that the person with dementia has to stop driving. In fact, they can drive safely for a while, but eventually they will have to stop. So knowing when to stop requires a fine balance of personal and public safety with the health and psychosocial consequences. So to this end, our project aim was to develop a resource to support, to support people living with dementia, their family, friend, carers, and healthcare providers in the decision-making and transitioning to non-driving. In this process of developing the DDR, we use the knowledge to action framework. And I won't go into details about this as it's a lot, but we just published a paper outlining that process, and I'd be happy to send it if you're interested. So this process of developing the DDR took place over 7 years. We first started with conducting some systematic reviews and compiling all the evidence that was related to driving cessation and dementia. We also conducted a meta-synthesis of qualitative studies on key informant subjective experiences of driving cessation and dementia. And we also did our own qualitative study, again exploring key stakeholders' perspectives about stopping to drive in dementia. We conducted interviews and focus groups with healthcare providers, service providers, family carers, and persons with dementia. As a result of this research, we found that there is a lack of understanding about how dementia affects driving, what's the impact. We found that there's a lack of training and knowledge among healthcare providers about assessing fitness to drive and supporting quality of life post-cessation. There are also very few established evidence-based interventions to support people in the decision-making and life post-driving cessation. We also found no one likes to talk about these issues. Yet, facilitating discussions about driving cessation are critical for early planning and promoting shared decision-making. We also found that addressing the emotional effects of driving cessation are just as important as attending to the practical aspects. One family carer in a research study was talking about her mother when she said, the trauma of losing her vehicle, the use of her vehicle was as traumatic as losing her husband. It was like losing a spouse. We also found that family friend carers need support in their role of maintaining purpose, roles, and the social participation of the person living with dementia. Finally, the resources that are available out there, we found are difficult to access, and their credibility was hard for people to determine. So we took all of this work that we had done and developed what we called the Driving and Dementia Intervention Framework. And we developed the aspects of driving cessation into the practical components and the emotion-focused components. And we use this framework as the foundation for our Driving and Dementia roadmap. The next phase of this process consisted of identifying and assessing all publicly available resources and tools that address driving cessation. We assessed these tools based on evidence base, their relevance, and their usability. So from a total of 75 tools reviewed, we selected 24. We then curated the tools and aligned them with the Driving and Dementia Intervention Framework. Throughout this process, we engaged with an advisory group comprised of 4 people living with dementia and 4 family carers. Throughout these months of developing the Driving Dementia roadmap, they provided extremely valuable ongoing feedback on the content and the format of the DDR. They helped us in terms of language usage, even the kinds of images that we should be showing. We also received feedback on the healthcare professional portal of the Driving Dementia Roadmap. We had a geriatric psychiatrist, an occupational therapist, and a manager of a driving authorities organization give us feedback. Other contributors included a plain language writer who had experience of developing educational content for people with dementia. We wanted to ensure that the language was suitable and usable for people with dementia. We also, of course, hired web developers and graphic designers. After we had developed the first sort of beta version of the Driving Dementia Roadmap, we explored the perspectives of 15 Alzheimer Society staff members and 8 organizations in 4 provinces. They provided feedback on this beta version on the content and the format and the design that informed the next stage of developing the roadmap. And it also informed strategies that we would use to implement it in Alzheimer Society settings and elsewhere. So before we took the DDR and had it online, we wanted to make sure that we got things right. So we conducted an implementation evaluation, meaning we implemented the DDR, we used it, we had people use it, and then we obtained feedback. So in this study, as I mentioned, the objective was to explore the DDR's acceptability, was it relevant, its adaptability in the settings that people were using it, and its preliminary benefits and limitations. So we worked with 6 Alzheimer's Society organizations in 4 provinces. And after the DDR had been used for a period of 3 to 6 months, we interviewed staff, Alzheimer's Society staff, current and former drivers with dementia, and family friend carers. So what we found is that the DDR, according to the participants, had high levels of acceptability. Participants said that they found the DDR very, very useful, very enlightening, and absolutely necessary. We also found that the DDR brought deeper awareness and understanding about driving cessation, which impacted how people approached it. For instance, being more diligent about observing warning signs. Well, just a couple of quotes here from some of our participants. So this family carer said, "It's helping me to monitor her. I'm going to make sure that every few months I either go in the car with her or follow her and talk to her about it on a regular basis." And a person with dementia told us, "It made me realize there's an end to driving somewhere in the future. Actually, I hadn't even thought of it. Somewhere along the line, I know I've got to stop." We also found that the emotion-specific content provided insight about grief and loss, enabling family members to attend to the emotional ramifications and initiate conversations with empathy and patience. Other reports from the findings indicated that the strategies that we instilled to remain mobile after driving cessation brought relief and hope. As one family carer said, "It gave me a little bit of hope that together as a team with my siblings, we can figure out a plan." So in this next, I'm now going to just give you a brief tour of the Driving and Dementia Roadmap. You can access it on www.drivinganddementia.ca. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to highlight some aspects of it using screenshots. So if you were to go onto the DDR, you would encounter this home page. As you can see, we have 3 portals, one for people with dementia, one for family friend carers, and one for healthcare professionals. And within the people with dementia portal and the family care portals, we divided it further to identify people who are still driving and people who are no longer driving. So if you're a person with dementia and you're still driving, this would take you to this page, where, as you can see, there is a list of topics that people can explore that they're interested in. These include, for example, understanding how dementia can affect my driving, recognizing when it becomes unsafe to drive, getting help deciding to stop driving, getting around without driving, dealing with my emotions, learning about licensing, reporting, and transportation options. So I'll take you to the page about getting help deciding to stop driving. So here you can see there are different accordions where people can click onto. For instance, there's information about how to talk to someone you trust, how to talk to your doctor, And then a series of worksheets that people can use. So for instance, I've highlighted here, we have the Dementia and Driving Decision Aid, which was produced by the University of Wollongong in Australia. And this is a PDF guide that people can download and actually work with. It takes the person with dementia a series of steps to help them make a decision about whether now is the right time to stop driving. If you're a person with dementia, for example, who is no longer driving, you click here. And again, you get to a similar page, but with less topics, because at this point, the person with dementia has stopped driving, but there's still information that they might be interested in knowing, for instance, getting around without driving. So if we click on that, we can see there are suggestions for alternative transportation, suggestions to change routines, for instance, instead of going to the bank, setting up automatic bill payments. And then there's worksheets. For instance, this one outlines a worksheet to fill out about using alternative transportation. If you're a family friend caring for a person with dementia, you can click on to here, and this brings you to a page. Topics are similar, but they are geared to the family friend carer. And I'll just open up, for instance, having conversations about giving up driving, which is a popular one. So here we outline some suggestions about how to have ongoing discussions about driving risk. Again, there's other worksheets that we provide that people can click onto and download. And then we also have videos. For example, in this video, this is about a wife having a supportive conversation about giving up driving with her husband who has dementia. It was produced by the Alzheimer Society United States. And we find that feedback has said the videos are extremely helpful, and people really love those. Okay, so if you're a healthcare professional, and you can click onto the healthcare professional portal, again, a choice of topics that the healthcare professional might be interested in. I've highlighted sort of the three that I'll just take you to right now. So assessing fitness to drive is a popular one because a lot of healthcare providers are not very confident about how to assess fitness to drive. So we take them through a comprehensive series, 8 steps that they can go through. And we also offer a PDF that they can download, so they have one on their desk that they can easily refer to. And then there's a section, another popular one, about learning about reporting, licensing, and transportation options, as that is often a significant part of a healthcare provider's work. So we offer some general guidelines, but because the reporting regulations vary across provinces, we put together resources for each province. So depending on what province you reside in, the healthcare professional can click on that link and get information that's pertinent to that jurisdiction. And I just wanted to show you that we also have a handout that people can click onto that either service providers or health professionals they can print this handout, give it to clients or patients in their office that the person can take home with them and remember to use it if needed, and it has the URL address. So on October the 19th, we officially launched the DDR, and we employed a variety of dissemination strategies that included a press release that was distributed via Newswire to media outlets across Canada. We did an email blitz to clinical research, dementia-based networks and associations. We conducted and are still conducting a series of webinars that feature the Driving and Dementia Roadmap. And we also engaged in interviews in the media, including CBC The National, the Globe and Mail, CBC Radio, and so on. So far, our dissemination strategies have seemed to be quite successful. We have, since we launched to date, at least over 22,000 users have visited the site, which we're very happy about, and we hope to continue that. And also, the DDR was has been accepted for inclusion in the World Health Organization Global Dementia Platform as a resource for people with dementia to access. Our next steps have been based on feedback that we've received since we launched. For instance, one of our projects is to develop a French version of the DDR. Considering we are a bilingual country, we think it's important to have the French language available, French version of the DDR. And we also are developing a PDF of the DDR. People have told us that some people are not computer savvy, or they don't have good access to the internet, especially in rural areas. So we're developing a PDF that people can, that service providers and healthcare professionals can actually give to people that they can take home. And then in terms of research, we will be conducting, again, a research study to explore the DDR's uptake and impact. Some of the questions we are asking is, how does the DDR get taken up? How is it adopted and utilized? And how does it impact the way users approach and manage driving cessation? Is it making a difference? And the methods that we're using are Google Analytics. Google Analytics gives us a snapshot of the number of people who are using the DDR, where they're using, what they're clicking on, and how long they're staying on those areas. And we'll also use surveys and interviews with people with dementia, family carers, and healthcare professionals. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please don't hesitate to contact us. And please do visit www.drivinganddementia.ca.
Thank you, Elaine. Really appreciate the information that you shared this evening. Again, just want to remind people, this is the time that you can start to ask questions. Before we move into the question and answer period, I just want to thank our sponsor, SGI. This evening was proudly supported by SGI, and we thank our sponsors for helping us make these evening education events possible. So thank you so much to SGI for your sponsorship for this evening. I'll now ask Laila, Allison, and Elaine to turn on their cameras, and we're going to start to ask some questions of each of them, and we have a number of questions that have been submitted this evening. So I will moderate that session, and we'll get to those questions right away. All right, the first question is for Laila, wondering how much money was spent on dementia research in 2022, and what could be done with more funding?
Last year we spent 3.2 million on research, and having more money is a great problem to have. Like I spoke about earlier, there's so many great applications, but we just didn't have enough to go down the list to fund more, so we can fund more. Also, in strategizing as we look to the future, more money could mean different projects. It could mean, you know, larger collaborations. So more money certainly helps in terms of the amount of application that we fund.
Thanks, Laila. And I think, as you mentioned, there's lots of highly rated grants that are left unfunded because we don't have the funding. So lots of opportunity potentially left on the table.
Absolutely.
Allison, the next question for you. Can changes in nutrition slow dementia's progress?
Depends which type of changes for the better, maybe. So there is a body of research that shows that enhancing nutrition and ensuring adequacy of key nutrients will slow decline and particularly prevent those comorbidities. So people with dementia often experience some physical frailty, which means that they're not able to recover from, you know, a minor setback like a cold or influenza or something like that as easily as someone who doesn't have that frailty. And malnutrition is a huge contributor to developing frailty. So change, if it's positive change, yes, there is ability to slow, and it is just so important for quality of life too.
Thank you. And Elaine, what is the best way to bring up the subject of driving cessation with your loved one?
That's a very good question. I think one of the key points to think about is to first try to bring up as early as possible, when there's still a lot of insight, and it's with the diagnosis of dementia, not necessarily at that time, but later on. I think just being really empathetic and gentle and saying, I've noticed, we should think about your driving as part of preparing for the future. And I would suggest going to the Driving Dementia Roadmap. I know we've had people tell us that family members that actually sitting down with their family member and going through it together was a great catalyst, a great way to talk about this. So I would suggest doing that for sure. Yeah.
Excellent recommendation to go to the website, and we can maybe send that link out to folks in our follow-up email as well too. So Laila, another question for you. Are we making much progress on prevention research, and what prevention measures can people engage in?
And so while I can't speak to the progress I'm sorry, what was the type of research? Preventative?
Yeah, what kind of progress are we making on prevention research?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you top of mind, but where I can refer you to is we invested a lot of resources in the landmark study to path forward, in terms of there's a lot about how diet and lifestyle affects the progression of the disease or the slowing the onset of it. So I will direct you to our website to look for that landmark study where you can get a lot more information. It's certainly a link that I can share with you. And Joanne, I just want to add as well, while I don't have that sort of technical knowledge, I'll be happy to field any questions through the 3 doctors that are on staff with the Alzheimer Society. So I'd be more than happy if you would send those my way, and I can get the answers back and we can share it with folks after the fact.
Thanks, Laila. Allison, a question for you. Can you apply the choice program to people with dementia who are not in a long-term care setting?
Great question. So the Choice Plus program and even the Choice program are really focused on long-term care and the congregate dining and how the long-term care works. What I would say is you can take those 6 principles, and I just have them on my other screen, so you're going to see my eyes divert. So Choice stands for connecting, honoring dignity, offering support, identity, creating opportunities, and enjoyment. So you can take those 6 principles and definitely implement them, any of us in our life. That would make mealtimes a more connected and relationship focused and enjoyable activity. So definitely living within the home, in the community with someone who has dementia, definitely. And I can pop a link into the chat for finding that Choice acronym.
Thanks, Allison. Elaine, did any healthcare professionals participate in the testing program? And how will doctors know about this resource?
Yes, we did have some healthcare professionals participate. As I mentioned, we had a geriatric psychiatrist and an OT. We also had our larger team. We have clinicians, geriatricians, geriatric psychiatrists who also tested it and gave us suggestions. But the question about how to tell doctors is actually a really good one, because I think that is probably our most challenging target audience to reach, because they're so busy and they are so bombarded with so much information. What we've been trying to do is we've been writing some sort of blogs on newsletters that doctors read we've also contacted the Canadian Medical Association, etc., and using all our contacts with colleagues to reach family doctors. But I think that is something that is probably the most challenging, and the group that really needs, all the healthcare professionals really probably needs it the most. But yeah.
Thank you. Laila, How does a research team engage clients in studies, and where do you advertise for them to get involved in studies?
So the studies are advertised by the researchers themselves who are hosting those, but you can find them on the participate in studies section of our research. So while we do not advertise any particular study, those are done, again, like I said, by the actual folks that are hosting the studies. But you can log into our website if you're interested to see what we have listed, and if you'd like to involve in any one of them. And again, it's the participate in research section of our Alzheimer.ca website.
And I'd just like to share that in some of our communications about research, if you're signed up for our e-newsletter, we're often linking people to that site on the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and also talking about opportunities for people to participate. So again, I think maybe another link in our follow-up message, just to link people to the Alzheimer Society website, so they'll know how to get involved.
That would be great. Thank you. And thank you for that question.
So Allison, just a more general question for you. Somebody wanted you to explain what a dementia care neighborhood is.
Sure, and apologies if I used any other jargon. Pop that into the chat too. I'm trying so hard not to. So within long-term care homes, if you think of the buildings themselves, they're divided into we sometimes call them units or areas. We're trying to call them neighborhoods to really reflect the community sense of the long-term care. So you would live on a particular neighborhood. You could think of that as your street if it was within a town. And a dementia-specific neighborhood, we used to call them secure units. So they may have different types of redirections and safety features, and they're specifically for residents who live with dementia to provide that really focused dementia care within them. I hope that makes sense. You can probably add to that, Joanne.
I think that's an excellent description of a dementia neighborhood. So thank you very much. Another question for Laila. Laila, were you going to add to that?
No.
Oh, sorry. Another question for you. Can you speak to what treatments are currently available for people in the early stages of Alzheimer's?
Again, I would have to defer to the doctors in our team at the Alzheimer Society. So if you can kindly forward these on to me after the fact, I will get those answered for you.
Thank you. I'm just checking for additional questions in here. Waiting for some messages from my team who's helping me in the background. All right. I have one more question for Allison. You touched on several points about scientific evidence and the things that we know about nutrition and dementia. I'm curious, from your perspective, why do you think it's important to research things like these programs if the evidence already exists and these are things that we should already be doing?
Joanne, that's a fantastic question that I'll try my best to answer. When we think about the body of evidence and the number of scientific articles that need to be critically appraised and really understood to then put into practice, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and you can't sort of expect that everyone is going to be able to do that for every aspect of care and long-term care, or for ourselves as individuals. So it's important that, you know, as researchers, we also invest in studying the translation of the evidence into practice to see how does it work. And, you know, I'll use the example of things like nutrition. There is a lot that we know about nutrition and preventing or delaying cognitive decline. There are a lot of dietary patterns that there's a great body of evidence for, and yet here are we all doing them? No, because we're humans. So we need to really also invest that evidence of what should we do. We need to still keep looking at that side of things, but then we need to be also focusing attention on strategies for how does this get put into practice and become part of our everyday lived experience, if that makes sense.
So basically supporting the research with implementation research as well too. Is that a good summary of?
Yeah, knowledge translation strategies and implementation science to look at how does this work? How does it actually embed into practice or into life?
Thank you. Well, we don't have any additional questions. So on behalf of the Alzheimer Society, I'd like to thank Laila, Allison, and Elaine for coming and sharing your research information with us. I know that I'm coming away from this knowing new things, and that's what I enjoy so much about these presentations is I always learn something new and something exciting that I can share with our clients and our donors and our supporters. Once again, I would like to thank Graham for coming and sharing his personal story, and to Dan for bringing greetings on behalf of the Alzheimer Society. And one more thank you to SGI for supporting and sponsoring this evening. Our sponsors make these evenings possible for everyone to be able to attend and enjoy. So on behalf of the Alzheimer Society, thank you so much for attending and have a great evening.